Welcome back to Thinkiverse Podcast, unlocking knowledge across the spectrum every day.
It's great to be back.
I'm Ryan Lamas,
And I'm Rona Sletto.
and today we're diving deep into a health topic that's been creating a lot of buzz lately: intermittent fasting.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's talking about it these days.
They really are. We're taking our cues from Dr. Mike Hansen's YouTube video, Intermittent Fasting Guide for 2024.
Oh, yeah, he's got some great insights in that video.
Definitely. So before we get into the details, can you just give us a quick overview of what intermittent fasting actually is?
Well, at its core, it's about cycling between periods of eating and voluntary fasting on a regular schedule.
Okay, so it's not about what you eat, but when you eat.
Exactly.
But I think a lot of people get confused about the difference between intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating.
Right. They're often used interchangeably, but there is a distinction.
Is time-restricted eating like a type of intermittent fasting?
Yes, that's a good way to think about it.
So with time-restricted eating, you're really just focusing on limiting your eating window to specific hours.
Yeah, and there's no calorie restriction involved.
So theoretically, I could eat whatever I want as long as it's within that time frame.
Yeah, basically it's about aligning your eating with your body's natural rhythms.
That makes sense. And speaking of natural rhythms, Dr. Hansen talks about the connection between fasting and our circadian rhythm.
Yeah, our circadian rhythm is like our body's internal clock. It regulates everything from sleep to hormone production to metabolism.
So when our eating patterns are in sync with daylight hours, it benefits us.
It seems like it, yeah. There's research suggesting that it can improve blood sugar control, fat production, and even blood pressure.
So even if I ate the same exact foods, eating them at night might be worse for me than eating them during the day.
That's what the research suggests, yeah.
Yeah.
Our bodies are optimized for functioning during daylight hours.
Wow, that's crazy. I know I'm definitely guilty of some late night snacking.
Yeah, a lot of us are.
All right, well, let's get into some of the juicier stuff. Dr. Hansen makes some pretty bold claims about the potential benefits of fasting.
He does. He talks about everything from weight loss to improved brain health to even slowing down aging.
Is there any science to back all of this up?
Yeah, while research is ongoing, there is a growing body of evidence supporting these claims.
Okay, I'm really curious about this whole cellular symphony analogy he uses. He talks about ketones and mitochondria, and it all sounds very intriguing.
Yeah, so when you fast, your body eventually depletes its glucose stores, which come primarily from carbs.
Right, so it's like running out of gas.
Exactly. And that's when your body switches over to using stored fat for fuel.
So my body becomes a fat-burning machine.
In a way, yes. This is where ketones come in. They're an alternative fuel source that your body can tap into when glucose is low.
Okay, so it's like my body's backup generator.
That's a great way to put it. But it's not just about ketones. This whole process triggers a cascade of changes at the cellular level.
Okay, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. What's going on down there at the cellular level?
Well, one of the key players is the mitochondria, which are often called the powerhouses of our cells.
I vaguely remember learning about those in biology class. Remind me what they do again.
They're responsible for converting fuel into usable energy for our cells.
Gotcha. So how does fasting affect the mitochondria?
Well, fasting seems to give them a sort of tune-up, improving their function and efficiency.
So like taking my car in for a maintenance check.
Exactly. And then there's this amazing process called autophagy.
Autophagy. I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Basically, it's like spring cleaning for your cells. It's a way for your body to recycle and repair damaged cellular components.
Oh, wow. So it's like giving my cells a chance to declutter and get organized.
Precisely. And it's a natural process that gets ramped up during fasting.
And this could have implications for things like inflammation and chronic disease.
It potentially could, yeah. And then there's also this concept of metabolic switching.
Okay, what's that?
It's the ability to switch back and forth between using glucose and ketones for energy.
So it's not just about being in a constant state of ketosis like the keto diet promotes.
Right. It's about having that metabolic flexibility, which is super important for overall health.
This is also fascinating. But before we go too deep into the cellular weeds, let's talk about the different types of fasting out there.
Sure. There are quite a few approaches, but some of the most popular ones include 168, 12-12, 52, and alternate day fasting.
Okay, so break those down for me.
Well, 168 involves fasting for 16 hours and then having an 8-hour eating window each day.
That one seems pretty manageable even for someone with a busy schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more popular methods.
Right.
Then there's 12-12, where you align your eating with daylight hours.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Keeping it in sync with nature. What about 52?
With 52, you eat normally for 5 days and then restrict calories on 2 non-consecutive days.
Okay, and you're not
Uh,
completely eliminating calories on those restriction days, right?
right, you're just significantly reducing them. And then the most intense method is alternate day fasting.
Wow, alternate day fasting. That sounds intense.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. You basically switch between full eating days and days with a single small meal.
So it's really important to find a method that fits your lifestyle and goals.
Absolutely. Not every approach is right for every person.
Okay, so let's say someone's ready to give intermittent fasting a try. Where do they even begin? Any tips for doing it safely and effectively?
Well, Dr. Hansen really emphasizes the importance of easing into it rather than going cold turkey.
That makes sense. I can imagine going from constantly snacking to a 16-hour fast overnight could be a shock to the system.
Exactly. He recommends gradually tapering down your eating window or calorie intake over a period of months.
So it's like slowly training your body to adjust to the new eating pattern.
Precisely. And this can help minimize any unpleasant side effects like extreme hunger or energy crashes.
Okay, so for example, if I want to work towards a 168 schedule with time-restricted eating, how would I taper down?
You could start by fasting for 10 hours each day and then gradually push back your breakfast and move up your dinner time.
So baby steps are key.
Yeah.
And would the tapering process be similar for calorie-restricted methods like 52?
Yeah, the general principle is the same. You'd just be gradually reducing your calorie intake on those restriction days.
And of course, it's always important to consult with your doctor before starting any new dietary regimen, especially if you have any underlying health conditions.
Absolutely. Safety first.
Now, let's talk about one of the biggest concerns people have about fasting hunger. Will I be absolutely ravenous all the time?
It's a common concern, but what's interesting is that research has found that while hunger hormones might initially rise during fasting, people don't necessarily feel significantly hungrier after they've adapted.
Really? That's so surprising. Why would that be?
Well, it could be due to a number of factors like changes in hunger hormones or an increased sensitivity to satiety signals.
So it's not this constant state of agonizing hunger that people imagine.
Not necessarily. And when you're eating nutritious, satiating foods during your eating windows, you're less likely to experience those extreme hunger pangs.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better about trying it out. So we've covered a lot of the basics of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, just scratching the surface, really.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our episode where we'll delve deeper into those potential benefits, like weight loss and brain health.
We'll also talk about how to make fasting work for you in real life.
And remember to like and subscribe to Thinkiverse Podcast on YouTube for more thought-provoking deep dives like this one.
We're unlocking knowledge across the spectrum every day. Welcome back
It's great to be back.
to Thinkiverse Podcast, where we're unlocking knowledge across the spectrum every day.
You know, it's amazing how much we're still learning about the human body.
I know, right? Like it's this incredible machine that we're still figuring out.
And intermittent fasting really highlights just how adaptable our bodies can be.
It does. In part one, we talked about the science behind fasting, the different types, and some of the potential benefits.
Right. We also touched on who should be cautious and how to ease into it safely.
So in this part, let's dive a little deeper into those benefits, especially weight loss, which is often a big motivator for people considering fasting.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive to some people, though.
Right?
Like, eat less to lose weight. Don't we need fuel to burn calories?
Yeah, that's a common misconception, but what matters for weight loss is actually creating a calorie deficit.
So consuming fewer calories than you burn.
Exactly. And fasting can help you achieve that by either limiting your eating window or reducing your calorie intake on certain days.
But it's not just about simple calorie restriction,
Right.
right?
It's the metabolic shifts that occur during fasting that seem to give it an edge when it comes to shedding pounds.
Okay, tell me more about these metabolic shifts. How do they impact weight loss?
Well, as we discussed before, fasting shifts your body from using glucose for fuel to using ketones.
Right. Ketones come from fat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this shift not only enhances fat burning, but it may also help preserve muscle mass, which is super important for maintaining a healthy metabolism.
So not only am I burning fat, but I'm also holding on to muscle. That's awesome.
Right. And preserving muscle is key for long-term weight management because muscle burns more calories at rest than fat does.
Makes sense. Dr. Hansen also mentioned that fasting can improve insulin sensitivity. How does that tie into weight loss?
Well, insulin is a hormone that regulates how our bodies use and store energy.
Right.
When your cells become resistant to insulin, it can lead to weight gain and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes.
So improving insulin sensitivity means my cells are basically becoming more responsive to insulin signals.
Precisely. It means your body can regulate blood sugar levels more effectively. and use glucose for energy instead of storing it as fat.
Gotcha. So balanced insulin levels, less fat storage.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, beyond weight loss, Dr. Hansen also delves into some fascinating potential benefits for brain health. What stood out to you from that section?
Well, I was particularly intrigued by the research suggesting that fasting might actually enhance cognitive function, especially memory.
So skipping a meal can make me sharper. Is that what you're saying?
Haha, not quite that simple. But there is evidence that fasting can improve neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to change and adapt.
Okay, that
And
makes more sense.
And this is thought to be partly due to the increased production of a protein called BDNF.
BDNF. What is that?
It stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Okay, so it's like a brain booster.
Yeah, you can think of it that way. BDNF supports the growth and survival of brain cells, and fasting seems to boost its levels.
Wow, and this could have implications for things like preventing cognitive decline.
Potentially, yes. And maybe even protecting against neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
He also touches on the possibility of fasting playing a role in cancer prevention. What's the latest thinking on that?
Well, the research is still in its early stages, but some studies suggest that fasting may help protect against cancer by reducing inflammation and oxidative stress.
Okay, so those are both things that can damage cells.
Exactly. They can contribute to the development of cancer. So fasting could potentially act as a shield against those harmful processes.
And some studies even suggest that fasting might make cancer cells more vulnerable to treatments like chemo and radiation.
Right. Which
Yeah.
could potentially enhance their effectiveness.
That's amazing. But of course, more research is needed.
Always.
Now, let's be realistic. Most people aren't going to adopt a fasting lifestyle just for some potential long-term health benefits.
Right. They want results.
And they want to see them quickly.
Yeah.
What's a reasonable time frame for someone to expect to notice positive changes from fasting?
Well, as with any lifestyle change, patience is key.
Okay.
You might start to feel some initial effects within a few days or weeks.
Like what kinds of effects?
Things like increased energy levels, better mental clarity, or less bloating.
Those are all good signs.
Yes. But in terms of actually seeing a difference on the scale, weight loss can vary depending on a number of factors.
Like,
Well, the type of fasting you're doing, your starting weight, your overall lifestyle, and how consistently you stick with it.
of course.
But many people start to see noticeable weight loss within a few weeks of incorporating fasting into their routine.
So it's not a quick fix,
Yeah.
but it can lead to lasting changes over time.
Exactly. And remember, weight loss isn't the only measure of success.
That's true.
Fasting can have a ripple effect on your overall health and well-being.
Even if the numbers on the scale aren't moving as fast as you'd like.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Hunger. Will I be starving all the time if I'm skipping meals?
That's what everyone wants to know, right? But it's interesting because research has actually shown that hunger levels don't necessarily skyrocket during fasting.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, some people even find that their hunger cues decrease over time as their bodies adapt.
So it's not this constant gnawing hunger that people imagine.
Not for everyone. And remember, when you're eating nutritious, satiating foods during your eating windows, you're less likely to experience those intense hunger pangs.
So it's all about making smart food choices during those eating windows.
Absolutely. Because what you eat still matters.
It's not a free pass to eat whatever you want.
Right. You still want to nourish your body with healthy, nutrient-dense foods.
So fruits, veggies, lean proteins, healthy fats, whole grains, all the good stuff.
Exactly. And try to minimize processed foods, sugary drinks, and refined carbs.
Which can spike your blood sugar and make you feel hungrier.
Exactly. So it's really about following the principles of a healthy diet just within a specific time frame.
Now, let's be real, life can get pretty hectic. Any tips for making fasting work when you've got a busy schedule?
Of course. One of the best things you can do is plan your meals in advance.
Meal prepping. Classic.
It really helps you stay on track and avoid those moments where you're starving and tempted to grab whatever's quickest and easiest.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even just prepping a few key ingredients or having healthy snacks on hand can make a big difference.
Any other time-saving tips?
Well, another strategy is to gradually shift your eating window rather than trying to make a drastic change all at once.
Like push back breakfast by an hour or two each day.
Exactly. Just ease into it and don't be afraid to experiment a little to find what works best for you.
Because some people might prefer shorter, more frequent fasts, while others might thrive on longer fasts a couple of times a week.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot where you feel your best.
Okay, so we've talked about planning and prepping, but what about social situations? like dinners with friends or family gatherings. How do you navigate those while you're fasting?
That's a great question. Communication is key.
Right.
Just let your loved ones know about your fasting schedule and why it's important to you.
What if they're not really on board with the whole fasting thing?
Well, it's okay to politely decline food if it's not within your eating window.
I guess you could explain that you're not hungry at the moment, but would be happy to join them later.
Yeah. Or you could suggest doing something that doesn't revolve around food.
Like going for a walk or catching a movie.
Yeah. Exactly. Remember, you're in control of your choices, and you don't have to compromise your health goals to please others.
That's a great reminder. Before we wrap up this part, I want to address a couple of common misconceptions about fasting. One I hear a lot is that it will slow down your metabolism, making it harder to lose weight in the long run.
Oh, that's a myth. While severely restricting calories for long periods can slow down your metabolism, that's not what we're talking about with intermittent fasting.
So short-term fasting is different.
Yes. In fact, some studies even suggest that it might actually boost your metabolism.
Really?
Yeah, potentially due to hormonal changes and increased muscle preservation.
Wow, so it's the opposite of what people think.
Exactly.
Another misconception is that fasting is just another fad diet.
Right. Well, fasting has actually been practiced for centuries for various reasons.
Religious, cultural health.
Exactly. It's not a new concept by any means. And the reason it's gaining traction now is because of the growing body of scientific evidence supporting its potential benefits.
So it's a time-tested approach that's getting a fresh look, thanks to science.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this episode, explored the benefits, the practicalities. What are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, first and foremost, remember that fasting is a powerful tool that can impact your health in a positive way.
Right.
But it's not one size fits all. Finding the right approach for you is essential. And if you need guidance, working with a healthcare professional is always a good idea.
Absolutely. Any other pearls of wisdom?
Well, focus on nourishing your body with whole, unprocessed foods during your eating windows. And be patient. It takes time for your body to adapt and for those benefits to fully kick in.
Great advice. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about your body, the better choices you can make for your health.
Absolutely.
Now, get ready for part 3, where we'll dive into even more fascinating aspects of intermittent fasting and its potential to really transform your well-being. Welcome back to Thinkiverse Podcast for the final part of our deep dive into intermittent fasting.
It's great to be back.
I'm Ryan Lamas, and we have the incredible Rona Scoletto with us again.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course. You know, we've talked about the cellular science, the potential benefits for weight loss and brain health.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But there's one thing that Dr. Hansen brings up in his video that I really want to circle back to.
Oh, what's that?
It's this idea that our modern 24/7 food culture might actually be working against our natural biology.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
It is. So our bodies evolved in a time of feast and famine.
Right, where periods of food scarcity were just a normal part of life.
But now we live in a world where food is available literally all the time.
24/7. I mean, you can order a pizza at 3 in the morning if you want to.
Exactly. So could this constant availability of food be messing with our internal rhythms and contributing to some of the health problems we see today?
It's definitely a possibility. Our bodies are incredibly adaptable, but they're also designed to operate within certain rhythms and cycles.
And these rhythms go beyond just our sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah, right. Our metabolism, hormone production, even cellular processes are all influenced by these natural ebbs and flows.
So by bringing back periods of fasting, even if it's just something like time-restricted eating, could we be getting back in sync with those natural rhythms?
It's possible. There's a growing body of research that suggests aligning our eating patterns with our circadian rhythms can have a lot of benefits.
For our metabolism hormone balance, even our mental well-being.
Exactly.
You know, it's pretty mind-blowing to think that something as simple as changing when we eat could have such a huge impact on our health.
It really shows you how interconnected our bodies are and how important it is to work with our natural rhythms instead of against them.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something we haven't really talked about yet, the
Yeah.
mental and emotional aspects of fasting.
Oh, that's an important part of it.
It's not just a physical challenge, is it?
No, not at all. Fasting can be a really powerful tool for self-discovery.
How so?
Well, it can teach us about our relationship with food, our bodies, our habits.
Yeah.
It can help us uncover those ingrained patterns and emotional triggers that influence our eating behaviors.
It's like a mindfulness practice in a way.
That's a great way to put it. You have to pay attention to your hunger cues, be more present with your food choices, and really tune in to your body's signals.
It's like self-experiment. You're constantly learning and adjusting based on how your body and mind respond.
Exactly. And that journey of self-discovery can be really empowering. It's not just about losing weight or improving your health markers. It's about developing a deeper understanding of yourself and how you interact with the world around you.
That's a great point. Well, Rona, this has been a truly fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure, Ryan. It's been great being here.
And to all of our amazing listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of intermittent fasting.
We hope you learned a lot.
We sure did. If you're enjoying these deep dives into the latest health and wellness trends, don't forget to like and subscribe to Thingiverse Podcast on YouTube.
We'll be back soon with more episodes unlocking knowledge across the spectrum every day.
See you next time.